drop stopping a plastic worm. Have you ever heard of that? Drop stopping a plastic worm. Well, it's actually kind of a technique that I developed several years ago, and it works really, really well. And I developed it for some really key reasons and where bass are located. Well, I'm going to show you today exactly what drop stopping a plastic worm is, how to do it, when to do it, and hopefully catch a fish or two in the process. What in the world is drop stopping a worm in the first place? When do you use drop stopping a worm? And what kind of technique and rigs can you use it with? Drop stopping a worm is just simply a matter of, as you throw that bait out and you let it fall, example, like pitch it over toward those trees. I'm gonna let that bait fall. I'm gonna let it fall 2 or 3 feet. I'm gonna pick my rod up, which stops it. I'm gonna let it fall, and I pick my rod up. I just barely shake the end of my rod tip like that. So as that worm is falling, you're stopping it, shaking it, letting it fall, stopping it, shaking it, letting it fall. One of the excellent places to do it is standing timber. If you've got a lake that's got standing timber, it's a beautiful technique to use. Let that bait fall maybe 3 or 4 feet. I'm gonna stop, let it fall, stop, shake the rod. You can do a lot of different things as it's falling. You can let it fall. When you pick up on it, it's gonna stop it. So that bait's falling, all of a sudden it's gonna stop. If you shake it a little bit, that's good. You don't really have to shake it, but it really seems to help if you do. So right out there, when the bait's falling right straight down by that tree, I'm gonna stop it, let it fall, stop it, shake it a little bit, let it fall. Now bass will bite a plastic worm mostly on the fall. Now they'll bite it when you're swimming it, obviously. But standing timber is one of the places where I use this technique a lot, because most of the time in standing timber, depending on how deep the timber is, the time of the year and the weather and stuff like that, the bass will not be all the way down to the bottom of those trees. Now, if it's shallow water, even in 6 and 7 foot of water, with a live scope, we've learned that the bass, a lot of times in 7 or 8 foot of water, before they move into spawn, those bass are maybe just about 3.5 foot deep. And so if you throw in there and try to let that bait go all the way down to the bottom, a lot of times it will go right by that fish, and if he doesn't bite it, you don't even know there's a fish there. So you want to do is you drop that thing down, stop, drop it down, stop. Now, if you are live scoping trees, you can see the fish in there a lot of the times. Sometimes you can't, even in a tree, sometimes you can't see them always. They might be behind the tree on the other side of it. You just might not be able to see them, might be real thick and you might not. But so you want to just let that bait fall. Stop it, let it fall, stop it. Let it fall, stop it. The other thing you're doing is you're trying to, if you don't have a live scope, you're able to determine how deep the fish are a lot of times. So you can kind of see about how far that bait falls. Stop it, fall, stop, drop, stop, drop, stop, drop, stop. That's exactly what you're doing. And you can fish basically every single tree in any place where there's a lot of trees. And you got lakes like, now Toledo Bend and Sam Rayburn still got a lot of trees in them. They're not covered in trees like they used to be back in the early days. I can remember years ago, when Dee Thomas came to fish a tournament on that lake. And Dee Thomas, of course, came from California, and Dee had never seen lakes that was just completely full of brush. And he came to Toledo Bend, and somebody asked him about Toledo Bend. Said Toledo Bend has got a lot of trees in there, a lot of standing timber. Have you ever fished a lake that's got a lot of standing timber in it? And Dee told him, no, I never have. He said, well, what are you going to do when you get there at that kind of lake? And Dee said, I'm going to flip every single tree in the lake. I'm going to flip every single tree in the lake. And Dee was famous for flipping. Of course, flipping is a different technique. Flipping is where you're flipping a bait out like that and then letting it fall. You can drop stop when you're flipping also. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But they said every tree in the lake. He said every single tree. He said during that tournament, I'll flip every tree. Well, he didn't realize there was not hundreds of trees in that lake, not thousands of trees in that lake, maybe not even hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of trees in that lake. I mean, there was trees everywhere. So that technique didn't work out as far as flipping every tree. But Toledo Bend is one of the lakes, any lakes that's got a lot of timber in it, is one of the lakes where drop stopping will really work. There's one about 6 feet down the middle of that tree. Not on the edge of it, in the middle of it. In the middle of it, went down about 6 foot, and he jumped out and got to grab that worm. Come here, baby. Come here, baby doll. Come up here. Look how fat that fish is. Oh my gosh. Looks like you've been eating people food. Big, beautiful bass. Come here, baby. Right in the bone. Got my worm back. I just used a peaceful worm there. I bit that off quite a bit. Look at that big fish right there. That's an incredible way to stop. That's drop stopping. Now I'm in 28 feet of water. Fish at six foot down. 6 foot down. I'm gonna tell you in a minute, show you exactly why he was where he was. This is our new Lucky Strike Hydra worm we come out with last year. It's got a hydra tail on it. Not really a whole lot of them out on the market yet, but that's really a great worm. That tail moves a lot of water. If you'll notice, it's got a ridge coming up on one side of it. It's a curly tail, but it's got a ridge coming up on one side of it, which gives it tremendous action, but it also moves a little bit more water, so it causes a little bit more commotion down under the water than just a regular curly tail worm, which a regular curly tail worm is obviously still a great worm. I remember when they first developed that, I think Mr. Twister was a company that came out with that originally. And the hydra tail, brand new type of worm. Okay, you can see right here why. You see this right here? This right here. Now it's on this locator. It's not showing quite as good as on this one. Look at this locator right up here, my front locator. Now I've got 2 live scope transducers on here, but let me just get down here and show you exactly what I'm talking about. You see this line, this right here, this all looks like interference or something right through there. That's not. Now that's exactly out here. The top of it is 16 feet deep. There's some trees out there. There's the bottom. There's the bottom way off down here. The bottom right here where we are right now is 32 foot deep. This is 16 feet. The very top of this line that goes across here, those are trees I'm looking at right out there. And you see, it's hard to see if there's any fish in those trees or not because they could be back in behind a tree or whatever. That is a thermocline. A thermocline is a 3-degree change in water temperature. You'll hardly ever see any fish below that thermocline. They're going to be right above it. So even though now I'm in 29 foot of water, I was in 32 right back here a minute ago. But that is a thermocline. So you want to fish above it. This is one of the times when you really want to use a drop stop technique. You want to, as you drop your bait down with that tree, you stop it, you stop it, you stop it. Once you get down, see these fish right here? Those 3 or 4 fish right there. 3 or 4 fish right there. They're right above that thermocline, right above it. Those aren't bass right there, probably big old crappie. There's another one right there. But right up above it. Now there's a fish swimming right there. That probably is a bass. But anyway, right above that thermocline. So you don't want to fish below it. The water can be 40, 50, 60, 80. It don't matter. Just don't fish below it. So you want to fish above it. That's why you want to drop down, stop, drop down, stop. Once you get down to that 16-foot level, there's no sense in going any further. When you're dropping on down further, you're just simply wasting your time. That is a thermocline. You can see it. You don't have to have a really newfangled fancy locator. Just any of the locators will show a thermocline. Pitched over there in the cedar tree now. Now most oak trees, individual big trees, trunk trees, you can probably pitch on one side and then the other side of them and be fine. Sometimes just one pitch is all you need to make. But when you get a cedar tree like that tree right there, it's got a lot of possibilities. It's got a lot of places for fish to be. So you really might want to make 4 or 5 drop stop casts to a tree like that right there. Oh, y'all have to forgive me just a minute. I'll quit drop stopping just a minute because there's shade right there. The sun is beating down, bluegill up there in that shade. I just can't resist throwing in the shade. God, bluegill grew into a bass. Up in the shade, I couldn't resist throwing in the shade. No drop stopping there. It's throwing in the shade. I swear I thought that was a bluegill. Jimmy, you big dummy. Pretty nice fish, actually. Oh, I threw up in that shade. A lot skinnier than that deeper fish was. Shade is shade is shade. You might be catching them in the middle of the lake, but if you get around some shade, throw at it, throw at it, throw at it. Hydra tail worm. I'm Texas rigging here, and on a Texas rig, you know, all you do with a Texas rig, you take a bullet slip sinker, like I've got it right here, and I've got a 5/0 Daiichi hook on there. I'll have to bite a little bit off. One good thing about that worm, it's a long worm. Bite it off, get you a new bite on it. You got a brand new worm. Didn't have to use a new worm. I got a brand new worm already tied on. Come back here on that. I rig like this and I come all the way through like I've done right here. And right where I'm at, I'm gonna go down through halfway, and then I'm gonna turn and kind of angle a little bit. So my hook is now at an angle and it comes up on top of the worm like this. Then I'm gonna pinch this back a little bit and just skin hook it in. That makes it perfectly weedless. It's straight, slip sinker. Now I like to use, on this technique right here, I like to use a 3/8 ounce worm jig head. This right here is just a little 3/16. It's about half the size as a 3/8, exactly half the size, I guess. But this makes it fall a little bit slower. It lets you, when it's falling, fall a little bit slower. Also, when you stop it, it's easier to stop because you got that light weight on there. And I'll run over all my stuff right here. Maybe I ought to just sit right here a while, huh? Nice fish. Nice fish. Now I'm out here in 12, 13 foot of water. I thought it was a little deeper than that. And that fish hit about 5, 6 foot down is all. Oh, that's a way to make a rod, Jimmy. That's a nice one right there. God, look at that girl. Look at that girl. Wow. Wow. That's drop stop fish right there. Drop stop fish, only about 4 foot down. Maybe 5, but I think about 4. Now that fish was not in the shade. It's in the shade of the tree, actually. It's in the shade down underwater. Where I caught that other fish a minute ago, he was actually in shade. Wind's picking up a little bit, which is wonderful because it's awful hot out here. Boy, that was right down close to that thermocline. That fish is about 12 or 14 feet deep. Water's 23 where I'm fishing right now. If you're wondering what side of the, oh, that's a beautiful fish. Golly, look at that big old bass. Look at that big old bass. Why do people always call when Joel Nedley? Why do people call me when I've got a fish on? They said, Jimmy, you dummy, why do you have your phone turned on when you're fishing? That's a big old pretty fish right there, just barely hooked. Up here on this boat with me. Ooh, look at that fish. That is a gorgeous barbless hooks. That's over 4 pounds. 4.5 pound bass right there, easy. Maybe pretty close to 5, but not quite 5. Whoa! Now that one's right above that thermocline, right above that thermocline. As I was about to say before that phone rang, if you were wondering what side of the tree to throw on, look at the sun. And the sun's shining this way, throw on the back side of the trees. It's opposite the sun. Even if the sun is up pretty high like it is right now, as we get more into the winter, the sun moves a little bit further south, and so you're in good shape. But even though you might not have much of a tree or much of shade on the water, there's shade down underneath. The exact same situation. You still got shade all the way down to the bottom, and you can see that shade a lot of times on your locator. But this time of the year, when the water temperature is warm, summertime, you want to throw. I thought I had another bite. You want to throw. You always want to fish that same tree again, by the way, too. Obviously, you know that. But it's summertime, when it's hot, water temperature is 80 degrees, shade. Early in the year, when the fish are soaking up the sunshine, the water's cold, water's 35, 40, 45, 50 degrees, the sunshine is the side of the trees you want to throw at. And this works with jigs. It'll work with a shaky head, work with a sinking worm. With a sinking worm, it's really easy because you had no weight. You can stop that really easily. There's some brush or another tree or something down there coming out. Ooh, come here, baby. He was down about 12 feet also. another big one. Yeah, he's down about 12 feet. Yep, down about 12 feet. I'll let him get it pretty deep. Glad I got a barbless hook on there. Oh. Yes, I am glad I have a barbless hook on there. That would be a bad deal. Not bleeding or nothing, perfect. Barbless hook saves another bass's life. Yes, yes, yes. That was about down about 12 foot too. I could see a few fish on my locator. And right above that thermocline. I mean right above that thermocline. Here we go. Boy, they moved down a little deeper as the sun's got up higher, I think. That was about 10 foot down right there. Drop, stop, drop, stop, drop, stop. A lot of times when you stop it and it just starts dropping again is when they bite. Come here, baby doll. Oh, another nice one. One of the things about catching these fish out deep like this, over this deeper water, they're usually a lot better quality fish. I've not caught but one really small fish all day long. And that's a really good quality bass right there. 3.5 pounds probably. You notice another thing, when you got the worm rig like this, with that Texas rig and that light sinker, you know, I've got actually the point of the eye of the hook's actually sticking out of that. You really don't tear up a lot of worms. I think that's only like about the second worm. I want to throw back in that same deal again, but I've drifted past it. It's only about the second or third worm really that I've used all day long. I bit a couple of them off. Bass, I thought that was a bluegill at first. He's hung up too, around the limb. If the line doesn't break. If the line doesn't break, I might get him. Nice fish. He was down about 8 foot deep. There's another one with him. I haven't caught 2 fish in one place yet. There's another fish with that fish. See him down there in the water. He finally saw us and swam off. I haven't caught 2 in one spot. They've just been singles. But, oh, that's a nice fish. Look at the belly on that fish. Golly, look at the belly on that fish. Summertime fish skinny, not all of them. That is a beauty right there. That fish, I'm stopping right now. And actually that worm has been, tastes like a fish, that worm does. That worm is really, really ragged. One side of it is split pretty good. And I'll try to get, I'm not gonna try to get another fish out of it. About used up that package of worms. Tastes pretty good, actually. Okay, drop, stop, eat a worm. Let's just wrap up real quickly a few key things. One, you can do it just a regular Texas rigged worm. I personally like a 3/8. I've got a 3/16 sinker on here today. Makes that worm drop a little bit slower. And just a regular Texas rigged worm. I've got a Lucky Strike Hydro Tail on here. Use whatever your favorite worm is to drop stock. You can also use a sinking worm with a weight in the worm, with or without. You can use that as a drop stop technique. You can use a shaky head if you like to do that. You can use some of the other rigs too. The key thing is that bait's dropping. You're picking your rod tip up to stop it. It's going, you're picking your rod tip up to stop it, and then letting it drop and stopping it, letting it drop and stop it. The key thing to do it is just remember anytime you have bass that are suspended, when they're not laying down on the bottom or not really in tight to cover, they're suspended like trees, boat docks, the edge of deep grass lines, things where bass are suspended up off the bottom, where you're gonna fall and go down. Thermocline, anytime you have the thermocline, just remember the bass are gonna stay above it. So if you could see a thermocline on your fish finder, and it's, let's say 12 foot, you can drop stop And once you hit that 12-foot level with your worm, you just will wind in and pitch it out to someplace else. Drop stopping, very effective way to catch suspended bass and to cover like 2 or 3 times as much water. One extra little tip that we didn't talk about out there today is if you're in relatively deep water, like 20, 30, 40 feet deep, and you have a thermocline, don't worry if you can see the bottom or not. Move down where all you can see is your thermocline. This will make your targets a lot bigger, make your fish larger, a lot easier to see. You do not have to see the bottom. We all want to see the bottom on a fish locator. But as long as you see that thermocline, fishing above the thermocline, you're fine. Drop stopping, try it. You'll catch them.